In this video, let's talk about how Excel deals with time. So basically, if you remember from a previous video, dates are simply a number of days since January 1st, 1900. So just to review that, let me go 1, 2 up here, and I will convert those to dates by selecting them and choosing short date. And we have 1/1/1900, 1/2/1900. Well, what time is a fraction of a 24-hour day. So to demonstrate that, let me put in a 0.25, and I will select both of those and drag down. We'll go to here even a little bit further. Okay, let's make them all 2 or 3 decimals. So here we go. Those are simply fractions. What if I convert those to a time format? What you'll get is the fact, I gotta make room, is that 0 is 12 a.m., 0.25 is a quarter of 24 hours, so that's 6 in the morning. Half of a day, half of 24 hours is 12 p.m., 3/4 of a day is 6 p.m., and then when you go to 1, you're back to 12 a.m. Now notice the difference up here in my formula bar. I'm just seeing the time. And then when I go down to 6 a.m., I just see the time, just see the time, just see the time. And now when I go to that 1, the number that was 1, it says, oh, well, this is 1/1/1900 at 12 a.m. because that was 1.0. And what is 0? It is 12 a.m. When I go 1.25, well, that's 1/1/1900, 6 a.m. 1/1.5 is, so you're getting the idea. 2.0 is January 2nd, 1900, 12 a.m. So the bottom line is, let me turn this back into fractions or numbers. Time is just a fraction of a day. So another way to look at this is basically if I were to take that 0.25 and multiply it times 24, it's 6. And if you remember when that was a time, it was 6 a.m. What is 0.5 times 24 hours is 12 a.m. Now it gets a little goofy right here. If I multiply that times 24, it gives me 18, which in military time, that is 6 p.m. 1800 hours is 6 p.m. And so all we're dealing with is fractions of a day. So now let's do an experiment. Let's say I have something that took place at 0.5, which is 12 p.m., and another activity took place at 0.4. Okay, well, what time is that? I don't know. I do know what 0.5 is. Let's see what 0.4 is. So one's at 12 noon, and the other thing is at 9:36. No, 9:36. Those are my 2 events. And now I want to know the difference between that. How many minutes did it take from the first event to the second event? So I can just subtract them almost. I'm going to take the largest number and subtract it from the smallest number. Now when I first do that, it gives me 2:24 a.m. And you're like, what? I want to know how many minutes are between these. Well, that's because these are formatted as time. Excel incorrectly assumes that I want this to be formatted as time. And you're like, no, I'm trying to figure out how many minutes are between those 2 things. So first of all, I have to convert it to a number. But then you're like, 0.1, well, remember, that's a fraction of a 24-hour day. And so I need to take that number, that 0.1, and multiply it by the 24 hours. And that tells me it's 2.4 hours between those 2 times. But again, 0.4 hours is a little hard to understand. And so we know that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So I go back up here, and I now multiply by 60. So I take that fraction, and I multiply it by 24 to get how many hours. And then I multiply by 60 to get how many minutes. So we get 144 minutes. Does that make sense? So 2 hours would be 11:36, right? 10:36, 11:36. And then from 36 to 12 o'clock, we're looking at 24 minutes. So 2 hours is 120. I add 24 more, and I get, yeah, it's 144 minutes. If I wanted to know how many seconds were between those 2 times, I would then multiply by 60 more because there's 60 seconds in every minute. And so now there's 8,640 seconds between those two times. Now let's take what we've just have gone through and apply it to this actual spreadsheet where somebody placed a call at 8 o'clock and it was answered at 8:05. And so notice we're dealing with the seconds unit here. So 8 o'clock, and then we have a couple more zeros, so that's 5 seconds later. How long did it take to answer? Well, we can see just by looking at it, it was 5 seconds. So the same thing, we're going to just take this and go subtract that number from the larger number. You hit enter, and this will happen. It says, oh, these two are times, so I will try and make this a time. And you're like, no, I don't want that to be a time. This needs to be a number format. Well, wait a minute, 0, right? That's because you're not showing enough decimals. If I increase the decimal, there is the fraction of a day. Well, we're talking 5 seconds, right? So that is a darn small fraction. But if I want to know how many seconds that fraction is, I need to take it. I need to take that fraction that we just calculated. I'm going to put some parentheses around that. And I need to multiply it to the fact that there's 24 hours in a day times 60 minutes in an hour times 60 seconds in a minute. And that gives us our 5 seconds. Now I don't need so many decimals, so I can shrink it back up again. And I can double click on that to autofill those values. Now notice it made everything yellow. And I have banded data here, so that's annoying. So as a highlight, or a side note, I guess I should call it, I'm going to grab that option fill dialog box and tell it to fill without formatting so I can leave my banded rows alone. So now I get the yellow, white, yellow, white, yellow, white right there. So now the same thing, how long was the call in minutes? And so I can see that the call was placed at 8, it went till 8:20. I only care about the minutes right now. I'm going to take the larger fractional value and subtract it from the smaller value. So there we go again, it's converting it to time. You're like, no, I need this to be a number. And I'm now going to take that number, and because it's minutes, all I have to do is take that fraction and multiply it times 24 hours. And then the fact that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So I'll take that, and that gives me that this was 20.7, so 0.7 is the 42. I think in this exercise they actually round this particular function, and the fact that I want it to be 0 decimal places, I'll just go comma 0 with the round function. And that rounds this to 0 digits. So there's 21. So now there's no point in displaying the decimals. And again, I can double click and find the option button and say, yeah, fill without formatting, so I can keep my banded rows. So that's how to deal with time inside of Excel.